Now that brings us to the car. A little bit different, pardon the pun, animal than I had seen before. This was just a straight wash. I did not remove the door rails. They are in such good condition. I saw no reason to pull these pins out, although I have regularly done that on other boxcars. Pull the pins out, clean underneath. I am going to touch up, barely touch the tops and the bottoms of each door with CRC 226 just to give them a little bit of lubrication and freedom of movement, although these seem to be quite free right now. And then what Digger calls the B door on the back side that really doesn't access anything. It even opens and closes. And I noticed that in some versions, according to Digger, they actually glued these in place, this back door that really doesn't serve any function other than for appearance. Okay, got the body off and got it washed, no problem. Wheels the same way, washed, polished, thoroughly cleaned up the contact wheels. Get those out of the way. And then that brings us to the car, which was a little bit unusual. The bottom has nothing terribly unusual. We probably all have cleaned these contacts, outside contacts on the truck before. You can, if you wish, take the spring out. I chose not to do it on this one, but you can take the spring out and eventually remove this if you want to clean underneath. I didn't see any need to, so I cleaned the bottom as per my usual specifications. However, I did have one challenge I didn't see coming. On the top structure of this, and I'm still a little bit concerned about this mat right here being a little bit above the height of the floor of the car, is that the vibrating coil, the vibrating mat, and these walls that form the hall or the trough for these cattle to go through are riveted onto the car. So there's no way that I could get them off. As a matter of fact, it makes me wonder, how do you get that off to begin with if you want to replace the mat? Because I was fully expecting to be able to and needed to change the mat. But I dusted it as well as I could as far as the mat is concerned. In other words, I did more dry cleaning than anything on the mat. And my only concern, again, is the fact this one's turned up just a little bit here, but we'll see how it performs. Only thing I could do from the top platform of the chassis up was to hand clean it with damp paper towels and alcohol paper towels. It was pretty dirty, about as nasty as I've ever seen the interior of any car, and it had some rust, a considerable amount of rust. I was surprised how much rust there was. The bottom cleaned up very nicely. I don't expect any problem with that. But we'll see once we get it all back together as to whether or not the cattle can move through this. Now, I have got some work to do on the cattle. Those are kind of time consuming because I'm having to wash each one individually and then remove the plasticizer, which is liquefying and coming through to give it that white color. This one I've finished. This is what they're supposed to look like. And my last step will be to work on the mats. I'm probably going to change, for each set of cattle, I'm probably going to change 2 mats to be new mats. I'll let the owner see that and see if he wants me to change out the other 2, but I'll have to order those. Now that brings us to actually the wheel placement on these cars. Digger, Gilbert, all of them recommend that when you lay track in here, that right here at these stops is you use 2 straight tracks, not one, positioned here. As you can see, that misses this piece right here that the track can pinch up against. But you use 2. Let them join right here and then push them in so that they're pinched in, held in by this piece and that piece. And you should be good to go. Now, when I set up my train, I always have the base or ground rail to be the outside rail. So if you would please imagine this one as being a oval that goes in this direction, not one that comes back toward me. So that would be ground, this would be power. When the car comes down, the sliding contact is going to hit this rail, and that's going to feed in the power. And the power, of course, won't come until the red button is pressed on the controller. The ground for the car will go through this rail, of course, provided that the wheels are properly positioned like this. Now what can happen is, and it's a common mistake, I made it myself, is if you take the Stockyard and you move it to the outside of the oval, this remains at ground, this remains at actually doing nothing, and this remains the power strip. Then you have to turn the car around, and when you turn the car around, you're going to put power to power. In other words, you're going to have power coming through the strip, power coming through the track, and that's not going to work. All you have to do is pop the axles and reverse them to make sure that they're on the opposite side and always touch the negative. So it's good to possibly label this somewhere very indiscreetly that this is ground, and then you can move the pin to the outside, inside of the loop like it's shown here, or to the outside of the loop. I personally prefer it to be the viewing side that you can see the cattle rather than seeing into the door of the car, but that's just personal preference. I like this side being viewable. If you turn it around, you do get the opportunity to see the cattle, assuming that you're standing on the outside of your loop at your table. You get to see the cattle instead of seeing the cattle go in and out the doors. So anyway, that's very important about this. Now I'm going to start the reassembly. It should be pretty straightforward. The vibrating assembly, the coil and vibrating assembly back into the grommets. This back on, put 2 screws in that holds this. Put the gate assembly back on. 3 tabs need to be bent. Put the shed back on. 5 tabs need to be bent, and it should be done. And the car should be done as well, but I do need to work on the cattle's feet or bottoms a little bit. Also, don't forget that what can make a difference on these cattle is whether or not their base is flat. If you have one that's badly warped, say it's extending up in the middle to make it convex instead of concave, then I've been told that that increases the vibration and the instability of the cow, and they start vibrating and bouncing a lot more and can fall over much easier. So just watch out for that. I don't know what the answer is to flatten that out, but I guess it could be problematic.